What if Manhattan loses power for 24 hours? Imagine the heart of the world's financial capital plunged into complete darkness. At exactly 7:02 p.m., a massive grid failure ripples across New York City. Within seconds, Manhattan, the island that generates over 20% of New York State's GDP, loses its lifeblood, electricity. The iconic skyline flickers out. Neon lights fade to black. Elevators stop mid-floor. The subway grinds to a halt, leaving millions stranded underground. In one of the densest urban environments on Earth, silence quickly turns into chaos. New York City is not just any metropolis. It is home to more than 8.5 million people, and the metro region supports nearly 20 million. Wall Street alone influences global markets, and the infrastructure that supports Manhattan is as complex as it is fragile. When power disappears, every part of this intricate web begins to unravel, and the clock starts ticking on losses that reach billions of dollars within hours. The first minutes are defined by confusion. Traffic lights fail, causing gridlock at every intersection. Emergency sirens echo, but they are swallowed by the overwhelming darkness. Tourists in Times Square, suddenly without the famous glowing billboards, stumble in panic. Residents in high-rise apartments realize that elevators are out, air conditioning is dead, and digital connectivity vanishes almost instantly. Manhattan, which never sleeps, is forced into an unnatural blackout. As the first hour passes, the impact deepens. Subway tunnels are immobilized, trapping thousands of commuters between stations. Emergency backup lights provide some reassurance, but the psychological toll is immediate. In hospitals across the city, diesel generators activate, but these lifelines are temporary. Each hospital has fuel reserves that last anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. The thought of medical equipment failing pushes doctors and nurses to prioritize patients, bracing for a crisis. Banks and financial institutions, though largely digital, face their own nightmare. The trading day may be over, but global markets run 24/7. Transactions worth billions freeze mid-process. Servers in New Jersey and data centers across the state continue to operate. But Manhattan's connectivity hub, the backbone of international finance, is cut off. Investors in Tokyo, London, and Dubai wonder why communication lines go silent. The ripple effect is immediate. Fear, speculation, and volatility in markets thousands of miles away. By the third hour, grocery stores and bodegas begin closing their doors. Refrigeration systems shut down, threatening perishables. Restaurants filled with evening diners are forced to evacuate kitchens, leaving meals unfinished. The economy, which usually thrives on non-stop energy, faces paralysis. A study by the U.S. Department of Energy estimates that even a localized blackout in Manhattan can cause losses of nearly $40 million per hour. Multiply that by 24, and the figures are staggering. Yet the economic losses are only part of the story. For millions of people, the blackout becomes personal. Families in luxury high-rises lose water pressure because pumps require electricity. Elderly residents struggle without elevators. Children become restless in stifling apartments as the August heat lingers. The sound of car horns, police whistles, and distant shouts fills the air. Without cell towers functioning, digital lifelines collapse. For the first time in decades, New Yorkers are reminded of how vulnerable the city truly is. As darkness continues, the city reveals a paradox. Manhattan is a fortress of steel and glass, but it is utterly dependent on invisible currents of electricity. Remove that current for even a single day, and the world's capital of finance and culture becomes fragile, unpredictable, and exposed. As the night deepens, the city's dependence on electricity becomes impossible to ignore. The blackout is no longer a temporary inconvenience, it is a cascading crisis. By the 6th hour, emergency services are overwhelmed. Calls to 911 multiply, but without functional communication networks, response times stretch dangerously. Police are dispatched to manage intersections by hand, waving flashlights in a sea of stalled cars. Fire departments face a surge of calls, from small kitchen fires sparked by candles to people trapped in elevators across hundreds of buildings. New York's hospitals continue to run on backup generators, but the tension in emergency rooms is visible. Doctors know the fuel supply is finite. Surgeries are postponed. Patients on life support remain stable, but the fear of power running out hovers in every ward. Administrators calculate how much diesel remains in their tanks, aware that supply trucks may not navigate a city paralyzed by gridlock. The blackout is no longer measured in minutes, it is measured in gallons of fuel. Meanwhile, Wall Street's paralysis grows more significant. Traders and analysts accustomed to instant data now face silence. In an era where milliseconds determine billions, this absence of information creates panic. International markets react not just to the blackout itself, but to the uncertainty it spreads. If Manhattan cannot communicate, global investors wonder what else has failed. Confidence, the lifeblood of finance, evaporates even faster than electricity. By the 8th hour, businesses across the city realize that losses are compounding. Retailers lock their doors. Restaurants discard food as refrigeration fails. Tech companies with servers in Manhattan scramble to transfer data to backups in New Jersey or farther afield. A city that normally contributes nearly $2 trillion annually to the U.S. economy finds itself hemorrhaging value at a rate difficult to calculate. The social fabric begins to fray. Residents of high-rise apartments face a simple but terrifying problem: water. Pumps require power, and without them, faucets run dry above the 5th floor. Families fill bathtubs, buckets, and bottles with what they have left, bracing for scarcity. In some neighborhoods, neighbors gather in hallways with flashlights, creating small islands of safety. In others, unease grows as rumors of theft and looting spread. Darkness breeds distrust. Law enforcement does its best to maintain order, but the strain is obvious. Officers are pulled from non-essential duties to patrol commercial districts, where luxury boutiques and banks stand vulnerable. For every shop protected, another goes unguarded. The memory of past blackouts, particularly the infamous 1977 crisis, when widespread looting erupted, lingers in the minds of both police and citizens. The city walks a fine line between resilience and chaos. Even the cultural identity of New York feels the blackout's weight. Broadway shows cancel performances, museums close their doors. Landmarks that usually shine as symbols of American prosperity, the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, the bridges connecting boroughs, become silhouettes against the dark sky. For residents and the millions watching from abroad, the image is unsettling. If the most iconic city in the world can vanish in an instant, what does that say about modern civilization's fragility? As dawn approaches, the scale of the blackout's impact becomes undeniable. The city has survived the night, but the cost is immense. Tens of millions of dollars in spoiled goods, countless disrupted lives, shaken investor confidence, and a population on edge. Manhattan is awake, but without power, it remains powerless. By the 12th hour of the blackout, the initial shock has transformed into something more troubling: endurance. Manhattan, normally a city of relentless energy, begins to slow to a crawl. Every system, financial, social, medical, now operates on borrowed time. The blackout is no longer an event to be waited out. It has become a test of resilience for more than 1 million residents trapped in the heart of the city. The financial district faces a situation it has not experienced in modern memory. Even though stock exchanges and banks can reroute digital traffic to servers outside the city, physical offices remain silent. Generators hum in lower Manhattan, but only in buildings wealthy enough to afford long-term emergency systems. Small firms and startups, the lifeblood of New York's innovation sector, sit dark and idle. By some estimates, each hour of financial downtime costs the U.S. economy hundreds of millions of dollars. The rest of the world watches closely. If Manhattan, the symbol of global finance, can stumble so easily, investors begin to wonder about the vulnerabilities of other financial hubs. But the crisis is no longer contained to balance sheets. On the streets, the blackout's human cost grows sharper. Residents in walk-up apartments are now fully aware of how fragile modern conveniences truly are. Without refrigeration, food supplies dwindle. Grocery stores without backup power begin discarding spoiled goods. Lines form outside bodegas and corner stores, where the last non-perishable items are sold at inflated prices. In a city where income inequality is already stark, the blackout highlights the divide. Wealthier residents purchase bottled water and supplies, while lower-income families rely on community aid or go without. Hospitals remain the most fragile domino in this chain. By the 12th hour, backup generators continue to function, but administrators are no longer confident they will last through the night. Fuel deliveries are uncertain. Even if trucks are available, traffic congestion makes reaching critical facilities nearly impossible. Nurses and doctors ration supplies while considering evacuation plans. Some patients are moved manually down stairwells to ambulances waiting on darkened streets, a logistical nightmare in high-rise structures designed for elevators, not human chains. For families, the sense of helplessness is crushing. Law enforcement struggles to adapt. The blackout has already forced thousands of officers into overtime, but by the 15th hour, fatigue sets in. Police precincts run their own generators, yet resources are stretched thin. Small incidents, domestic disputes, robberies, traffic accidents pile up as officers are redeployed to high-risk zones. Businesses along Fifth Avenue and Soho install makeshift barricades. Rumors of organized looting circulate, echoing the infamous chaos of the 1977 blackout. For city officials, preventing a collapse of public order becomes as important as restoring electricity. The city's transportation paralysis deepens. Subways remain frozen underground, their vast tunnels eerily silent. Above ground, buses run irregularly, clogged by gridlock. Bridges and tunnels face massive traffic jams as people attempt to leave Manhattan altogether. Ride-sharing services collapse, unable to function without internet connectivity. For many, the only option is walking. By the 18th hour, streams of residents make their way uptown or across bridges on foot, creating haunting images of mass migration in the middle of America's largest metropolis. As night approaches again, the psychological toll becomes unavoidable. The skyline, normally a beacon of light visible for miles, remains dark, broken only by scattered pockets of generator-powered buildings. Tourists, once drawn to the city that never sleeps, gather in hotel lobbies lit by candles, unsure if they will be able to leave. The blackout transforms Manhattan into a paradox, a city of millions, yet eerily silent, vulnerable, and fragile. The cultural and symbolic cost grows just as heavy as the economic one. New York represents stability and progress to the world. Its darkness sends a different message. Media outlets broadcast live from the edges of Manhattan, showing drone footage of a silent skyline. Commentators debate what this means for the nation's preparedness. If this can happen here, one headline reads, where else is America vulnerable? For many viewers, the blackout is not just a local story. It is a warning about the fragility of modern civilization. By the 20th hour, desperation quietly spreads. Community centers open their doors, providing limited relief in neighborhoods where power is least likely to return quickly. Volunteers distribute bottled water and food donated from outside the borough, yet even acts of kindness highlight the dependence on power that defines modern life. Without refrigeration, without digital communication, without reliable transport, even the wealthiest city in the world feels fragile. As midnight approaches, Manhattan faces an unfamiliar reality. It is no longer the city that never sleeps. It is a city forced into stillness, waiting for the hum of electricity to return. The question is no longer, when will the lights come back? But how much longer can the city endure without them? Every minute of darkness deepens the cost, in dollars, in security, in confidence, and in spirit. By the 21st hour of the blackout, the psychological burden on Manhattan's residents begins to outweigh the physical challenges. What started as inconvenience and escalated into disruption is now shaping into something far deeper: uncertainty. People can endure discomfort when they know relief is coming. But when power outages stretch beyond a day, the absence of certainty erodes patience, discipline, and trust. City officials issue statements urging calm, promising that utility crews are working around the clock. But the public has no evidence of progress. Social media, normally the lifeline of real-time information, is largely silent. Cell towers without power provide only intermittent service. Residents are left to rely on word of mouth, creating an environment where rumor spreads faster than truth. Some say the blackout will last days, others whisper about sabotage or terrorism. In the void of information, speculation thrives. The financial impact deepens. Wall Street firms with backup systems outside Manhattan continue to function, but their ties to the city are symbolic as well as practical. For global investors, the sight of America's economic engine paralyzed, even temporarily, is unsettling. By the 22nd hour, markets abroad have already priced in the cost of New York's silence. Reports estimate billions in lost productivity. International business channels broadcast images of Times Square, usually ablaze with lights, now nothing more than a shadowed canyon. Confidence, not cash, becomes the most critical commodity under threat. On the streets, survival strategies emerge. Some neighborhoods display remarkable resilience. Residents gather to cook perishable food in communal meals, sharing resources that would otherwise spoil. In others, tensions flare. Small arguments over food and water supplies escalate quickly in the darkness, with no easy way to call for help. Police do their best. But even at full deployment, the NYPD cannot cover every block of Manhattan. By the 23rd hour, the city resembles a patchwork of experiences. Solidarity in some corners, vulnerability in others. Hospitals remain at the breaking point. Diesel deliveries are now escorted by police convoys, recognizing that fuel has become as valuable as currency. Administrators juggle impossible decisions. Which wards receive priority power, which machines must stay on, and which procedures are postponed indefinitely. The blackout has transformed modern medicine into a triage system reminiscent of wartime conditions. Families waiting outside ERs feel the weight of helplessness as critical care becomes a gamble of time and fuel. Transportation shows no sign of recovery. Subway tunnels, once arteries of movement, remain silent caverns. Bridges choke with outbound traffic as thousands attempt to flee the island before nightfall. Helicopters hover above, tracking the exodus of people on foot across the Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Williamsburg bridges. For many New Yorkers, the image evokes past crises, 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, and the 2003 blackout. But this time feels different. The uncertainty of duration, coupled with the global attention, gives the event a gravity unlike anything before. The economic ripple effects extend beyond Manhattan. Neighboring boroughs, though not completely paralyzed, bear the weight of displaced populations. Brooklyn and Queens face sudden surges in demand for food, shelter, and fuel. Hotels outside the blackout zone raise their prices overnight, turning scarcity into profit. New Jersey ferries, usually a convenient commuter option, become lifelines. Even in areas with power, fear spreads. What if we are next? By the 24th hour, Manhattan has crossed a psychological threshold. The city has officially been dark for a full day, and the symbolic impact reverberates worldwide. News outlets treat the event as a defining crisis of the decade, placing it alongside natural disasters and geopolitical upheavals. Analysts debate the cost. Some estimate billions in direct losses. Others warn that the true price will be measured in shaken confidence, disrupted trust in infrastructure, and long-term shifts in urban policy. The cultural blow is equally sharp. For tourists, the promise of New York as the city of dreams has been replaced by frustration and fear. For residents, the experience is personal, a reminder that the city's strength lies not in its skyline, but in its people. Yet those people now sit in darkness, waiting for answers. Museums remain shuttered, Broadway stages empty, landmarks unlit. A city built on the promise of resilience now finds its reputation tested in front of the entire world. Officials face difficult choices. Restoring power safely is not as simple as flipping a switch. Bringing an entire grid back online after a catastrophic failure requires balance. Too much load, too quickly, risks another collapse. Engineers work methodically, but the clock is unforgiving. Every hour without power deepens the wound. The mayor issues a statement: Manhattan will recover, New York will recover. But recovery, as the 24th hour arrives, feels distant. At the end of the first day in darkness, Manhattan stands at a crossroads. Its people endure, its economy bleeds, and its reputation trembles. The blackout is no longer just a crisis of electricity. It is a test of resilience, leadership, and trust. The city waits, not knowing whether the coming hours will bring light or extend the shadow. As Manhattan enters its second night in darkness, the consequences of the blackout begin to extend far beyond the island itself. 24 hours without power has already reshaped daily life. But the greater question now emerges: what happens if the blackout continues? This is not just a story about lost lights and stalled trains. It's a glimpse into how quickly a global city can unravel when the foundation of modern civilization, electricity, disappears. The immediate cost is staggering. Economists estimate that each additional day without power would drain billions more from the US economy. Manhattan alone contributes nearly 10% of national GDP through finance, media, technology, and tourism. With offices dark, data centers strained, and millions of workers idle, the shockwaves spread globally. Asian and European markets respond nervously, and multinational corporations begin rerouting operations to other financial hubs. The phrase, "too big to fail," suddenly feels fragile when applied to New York. But while the numbers capture headlines, the human experience remains the heart of the crisis. Residents face choices they never imagined, whether to stay in apartments without water and refrigeration or to leave in search of stability elsewhere. Families with young children or elderly relatives find the blackout intolerable, while wealthier residents flee to hotels outside the city. Those left behind become increasingly reliant on community support. Churches, schools, and recreation centers transform into makeshift shelters. Volunteers distribute food and blankets, but supplies cannot keep up with demand. Hospitals teeter on the edge of collapse. Backup generators, already stretched thin, require constant refueling. Each delivery becomes a mission, requiring coordination among city officials, law enforcement, and utility crews. Patients are transferred to facilities outside Manhattan when possible, but for many, moving is too risky. The blackout exposes an uncomfortable truth. Modern medicine is inseparable from electricity. Without it, even the most advanced city in the world begins to resemble a place struggling with 19th century limitations. Security concerns escalate as the blackout drags on. Police forces remain on high alert, but officers are exhausted after working around the clock. National Guard units prepare for deployment, recognizing that civil order hangs by a thread. Some neighborhoods show resilience, coming together to share resources and maintain peace. Others experience spikes in crime, fueled by desperation and darkness. The balance between community solidarity and urban unrest shifts by the hour. The psychological toll becomes harder to measure, but no less real. For residents accustomed to constant light, the darkness feels alien, almost threatening. Manhattan's identity as the city that never sleeps has been erased, replaced by an eerie silence. Tourists cut their visits short, leaving hotels half empty and businesses without customers. The city's reputation, built over generations, now suffers damage that may outlast the blackout itself. Infrastructure experts warn that restoring power is only half the challenge. Rebuilding confidence may take years. Businesses that experienced crippling losses will consider relocating servers and operations outside Manhattan. Investors will pressure city leaders to upgrade the grid with redundancies, backup systems, and cyber protections. Insurance companies will reassess policies, raising premiums for corporations headquartered in vulnerable zones. The blackout becomes more than a local crisis. It reshapes how the world views risk in global cities. And yet, amidst the fear and disruption, stories of resilience emerge. Communities organize flashlight patrols to keep streets safe. Neighbors cook meals together in courtyards and distribute food to the elderly. Medical staff work without rest to save patients in impossible conditions. Volunteers from across the region arrive with supplies, showing that even in the darkest moments, the city retains its capacity for solidarity. By the 30th hour, the pressure to restore power reaches a climax. Utility crews work through the night, balancing the technical risks of restarting the grid too quickly against the human cost of delay. Slowly, sector by sector, lights begin to return. First in isolated neighborhoods, then across larger swaths of the city, electricity hums back to life. Cheers erupt from apartment windows. In Times Square, when screens flicker on, a symbolic sense of relief spreads, not just across Manhattan, but across the world. Yet the recovery is uneven. Some neighborhoods remain dark for hours longer, fueling frustration and reinforcing perceptions of inequality. Hospitals breathe a sigh of relief, but remain cautious, aware that the crisis revealed dangerous vulnerabilities. Businesses reopen, but the losses are permanent. The city has survived, but it has been scarred. In the days that follow, analysts debate the lessons. Could New York invest in microgrids, renewable backups, or decentralized energy systems? Should financial institutions diversify operations beyond Manhattan? How can hospitals and emergency services ensure resilience in the next crisis? The blackout is not just remembered as a moment of darkness, but as a wake-up call about fragility in an interconnected world. For residents, the memory lingers. The silence of a powerless Manhattan remains etched in their minds. The sound of a city forced to pause, the sight of landmarks swallowed by shadows, the vulnerability of being cut off in the global age. Parents tell their children about the night New York went dark. Families stockpile candles and bottled water, a quiet acknowledgement that modern life is not as secure as it seems. In the end, the question is not just what happens when Manhattan loses power for 24 hours. The deeper question is, what does it reveal about us? A blackout strips away the illusion of permanence and exposes the fragility of systems we take for granted. It shows that even the most powerful city in the world is only ever a few switches away from silence. and it challenges us to imagine whether we will learn from the darkness or wait until it returns again.